Australia's Pacific Solution policy for transporting of asylum seekers to detention centres on island nations could see Niue being considered as another option. In 2012, the Australian government reopened the Nauru and Manus Island detention centres. During recent talks with Australian government officials, an offer was made by the Niue government to consider Niue as a potential processing centre for asylum seekers.
We have offered to the Australians the possibilities of them using Niue as a refugee place for vulnerable children and women and so on. It's not something that it's going to be done in a hurry. It's part of our, I suppose, regional obligations under the Pacific Island Forum mandate, that if a member is thinking that we'll make an offer. The Australians themselves are saying, well, they're probably not able to look at Niue at the present time. They're looking at expanding Nauru and PNG, as they've stated. But the offer's there. And anybody's entitled to come and talk to us about that now. As I've said, it's similar to mining. Don't wait until we think. We've already told everybody that we are looking at mining. People should tell us. One person has indicated that they're not interested in mining. Fair enough. I don't have any problems with that. But it's not something that we wish to surprise people with. It's a bit like these taxes we were talking about. We haven't surprised people about those or the increase in pay for the old folks. And we're still looking at increase in pay for public servants. We are not surprising people. We are carrying out what we said and promised that we will try to do.
Premier Talangi says the offer is there, but the matter will need to be further discussed. But this offer has not registered well with opposition Member of Parliament Terry Coe, who disagrees with the idea. Mr. Coe says that Niue should learn from the problems currently faced by Nauru and PNG. And if Niue heads down this path, Niue would probably face the same issues. Before making such an offer, Mr. Coe believes the government needs to rethink or think seriously about what the social implications would be for the island and whether Niue has the capacity to serve as a processing centre. According to Premier Talangi, it is likely that a decision on whether or not the offer to have a processing centre on the island will be reached within 2 to 3 years. The government will now revisit plans to have asbestos on the island removed and returned to New Zealand. This was confirmed by Premier Toke Talangi. Following Cyclone Heta in 2004, there was a concern that the damaged asbestos from hurricane house roofing posed potential health risk for people, and a project for the safe removal and collection began. This project was administered by the Environment Department, but has now been taken on by a private contractor. Over the years, the issue of asbestos in Niue has been contentious, with a range of options to consider: whether to have asbestos put in containers and dumped at sea, collected and buried on the island, or stored to be returned to New Zealand. Premier Talangi says removing asbestos and returning it to New Zealand has always been their preferred option.
The asbestos has now been put in containers, and we're now looking at getting more containers to finalise and finish all the asbestos that's still sitting out there. And eventually we're also working with a consultant to get the asbestos shipped down to New Zealand and buried there.
A while back, there were quite a few consultations and consultants brought in to help government with that option of burying it. Is that still an option right now?
It's still an option if we can't send them away. But that was always the option that the government, it's a last resort option if you wish. The government has always desired to take this asbestos out. We understand that the consultant who is working in the Cook Islands, who is a Cook Islander, has been able to send 2 containers from Aitutaki to New Zealand for burying, and we're using the same consultant to assist us with the administrative processes that are required to ensure that we meet the compliance requirements of New Zealand before we can send them.
Asbestos that has already been collected is currently being stockpiled and stored at the Hui Hui site. Public concerns were raised over the delay to remove the materials, but progress has also been slow. A previous plan to have the asbestos buried on the island has now been put on hold, and Premier Talangi says negotiations to have the asbestos returned to New Zealand continue, with a number of issues that need to be finalised with Quarantine New Zealand and other matters. If the bid to have the asbestos removed is successful, government is hopeful this will happen in February or March of next year. Niue Police's Blue Light experience today took on a more informative approach in forging greater interaction with Niue High School students. The police force were all on board to run through what it takes to become a police officer and the work that they do. The open discussions facilitated by members of the force had children divided into 4 groups and taken through a series of questions and answer sessions to gauge their understanding of current issues. For one group, they looked specifically at cyber safety and the implications of online activity, how it relates to them, and ways to be more cautious of what they say or do online. Some of the newer members in the force shared their experiences and decisions of joining the police force as part of career development, while another group were given insight on ways to deal with domestic violence, the root causes and possible solutions, but most of all to ensure their safety. Border security and law enforcement was discussed to some degree by giving students a brief on what police role is to ensure the overall safety of people on the island. But it seemed students were more interested in the police safety equipment and demonstrations using handcuffs, safety vests and batons. Hopefully today's exercise will get them thinking of a career in the police force or to become more law-abiding citizens. A group of students from the University of Auckland are on the island for 2 weeks as part of their mission to return to their roots. The students are from the Faculty of Education Pacific Island Students Association and are at different stages in their studies in areas of teaching, social work and youth work. We caught up with the group today during one of their outdoor learning sessions and spoke to their leader about the initiative.
Well, we wanted to create an initiative that would allow New Zealand born youth from Niue or from the Pacific Island to reconnect back. Unfortunately, a lot of our youth have lost contact or lost the connection back home. So because our matua, we left with a dream of education, and now that our youth have this education and the skills, we wanted to convince them that, you know, using the skills as a way of connecting back. So, because some of us are teachers, social workers and youth workers, like, why not do a stint here in Niue, just giving back to the Niue community here? Like, why not just give it a try, you know? So that was basically it, and it's evolved to this and learning opportunities for us to putting into practice the stories that we've been told back home in New Zealand, stuff that you can't learn anywhere else but in Niue. Before we left, we didn't have much planned because our communication with Niue had been pretty sporadic, been breaking down here and there, but we decided when we get to Niue, we'll just go with the flow. But we managed to connect up with Bertha Tongahai, and she got us to clean the public library in the primary school. We've attended the primary celebration, the prize giving, and we cleaned up our old house in Narofi, which was new, hard work in the hot sun and stuff like that. And we've done a lot of swimming because it's a bit hot for us. Yeah, now the umu today we're learning. It's worked, but it's also learning for us. So it's good to be able to respect the process and why it's so hard and what people go through every day sometimes here in Niue.
Carlos says that this has been a long time coming and that it has taken 2 years of planning and fundraising to fulfill what they had set out in the beginning. There are 17 members in the group, including a few matuas and a mixture of students of Pacific Island heritage. We spoke to one of the team members about how she hopes to use the experience and her studies to share knowledge.
We just wanted to see what we could do here that relates to our degree, but we've talked to someone in the government house who has suggested maybe we could go and meet particular people that could probably help us, but yeah, maybe that's something we can do. I wanted to share the experience with my friends, so there's 2 Samoans and a Tongan, so that's the 4 of us, and I just wanted to show them where my mum came from, and yeah, but it has met my expectations. Yeah, I think they're having a good time. I'm really enjoying the trip. We've got to experience the rock pools and all the swimming places, and we've got to eat most of the local food, which is quite nice, which is something that I've always been looking forward to since we started fundraising 2 years ago.
The group has been overwhelmed by the generosity of the people in making them feel welcome and their willingness to share knowledge. With one more week on the island, it will be an opportunity to scope out how they may be able to use their skills to help Niue. For those of Niuean descent, this trip has given them a better understanding and greater appreciation for their cultural heritage. We wish the group well for the remainder of their time on the island. Young students were rewarded for their efforts throughout the year at the annual prize-giving ceremony at Niue Primary School yesterday. Displays also reflected on the developments over the years since Niue Primary was established in 1989. Students were dressed to impress, and it was apparent that parents also put a lot of effort into making costumes and accessories for them to shine in what is the most eagerly awaited event of the school year. There was a great level of support and sponsorship of prizes from businesses, government departments, individuals and organizations who were keen to offer items and cash for the many prizes for the day. For the senior students in Year 6, they were seated at front and given the honor of leading the singing, showing their skills in guitar and ukulele playing. But it was also a farewell as their last prize giving at Niue Primary School as they prepare to advance and move on to Niue High School next year. What was interesting to see was that there were so many prizes that almost every child got a prize, with recognition not only for their academic achievements, but also best behavior, most improved, citizenship, performing arts, cultural crafts, sporting achievements, and principal awards. But many were anxiously awaiting the great reveal of who would get the ultimate prize in Year 6 for the Ducks, going to the best overall student for the year. That went to Shakaya Lifalangi, and runner-up went to Chloe Ioane. And that concludes our news bulletin for this evening. Don't forget to check out the official opening of the Lawn Bowls Green this coming Saturday at 9 in the morning.